My dear friend, Mary, is a Washington High School graduate who now lives in Bexley. She's the daughter of Massillon Museum's beloved former volunteers, John and Amelia Sparks. I hope that many of you remember John and Amelia. John worked so hard to help us move this museum.
Oh, you better not get into this or I'll cry.
Oh, no. Well, plug your ears. Oh, there they are, right there, in case you need a jog. John was my sidekick for more than 10 years and did anything we needed done. And Amelia was often the very gracious face at the front desk, and she too did anything we could possibly need help with. Enough, I'm done with that. Right. Mary retired in 2017 after 35 years in the insurance industry. Her involvement with the Bexley Community Garden led her to becoming a Master Gardener volunteer the following year. She now offers her time and expertise in the Columbus area for the Heritage Gardens at the Governor's Residence. We already know we have a question about that, so from one of you, Grange Insurance Audubon Center and Franklin Park Conservatory in Columbus. She's the president of the Volunteer Gardeners Group for the Gardens at Gantz Farm in Grove City and a founding member of the Bexley Bloomers. That could be taken either way. That's pretty fun. And she recently organized winter education events for garden enthusiasts. Mary has been appointed to the Bexley Tree and Public Gardens Commission, which is a big deal because Bexley is the first municipality in the country to be accredited as an arboretum by the Morton Arboretum, I was hoping I'd get that out right, in Chicago. In her spare time, which I don't know when that is because we hardly can find time to get together, Mary enjoys traveling with her husband Greg, who joins us here. They like to go to every major league ballpark in the country. They've been there, and some are repeats. They go to vineyards in this country and abroad, and they love to relax at oceanside resorts. Don't we all? The consummate Italian cook in her own garden, she raises so many kinds of garlic she has to keep track of them on a spreadsheet. Mary McMunn, Master Gardener.
Oh, thanks. Wow, that was a lot. Thank you, everybody. Wow, it's really wonderful to be here this afternoon with all of you. The Massillon Museum, I get choked up just talking about it. It's a special place for me, and my parents spent a lot of time here, and so I guess they were a good influence on me for volunteering. So anyway, like Margie said, I spent a lot of my time volunteering, and in 2018 I was very fortunate to get into the Master Gardener program through Ohio State, and as a result it opened up many doors, and one of them was the doors at Heritage Garden at the Ohio Governor's Residence, which is located on the north side of Bexley on Parkview Avenue, if you're familiar with that area of the state. So the Ohio Governor's Residence was actually built and started its life as a private home. In 1925, it was the home for Malcolm Jeffrey, whose father founded Jeffrey Manufacturing. Jeffrey was a large manufacturer of coal mining equipment and operated in Columbus until about 1974 when the manufacturing piece was sold. Unfortunately, about 6 years after Malcolm moved into this lovely home, he passed away. So the construction of this house actually began in 1923, and the family moved in 1925. It was designed by a prominent Columbus architect, Robert Gilmore Hanford, who actually worked with Frank Packard, who that name may be familiar to some of you. The homeowner's desire to live in a more country estate setting is reflected by the Jacobean revival style, which was also a very popular style during the early part of the 20th century. So the ornate brick chimneys and some of the curved gables and mullion and transom windows are indicative of this construction style. And this photo was taken in about 1925. It's quite a stately home. And ironically, his brother lived right down the street in a beautiful home, Jeffrey Mansion, which is another place where I volunteer. That's the Bexley Bloomers. So, and here's how it looks today. So to the left of the drive, as you pull in, you'll see the Governor's Grove, which is actually bunch of trees, various types of trees that have been planted by each governor over the years. You'll see American chestnut, black tupelo, bur oak, red oaks. There's a rather large Kentucky coffee tree, which was a donation from then Governor Ernie Fletcher. We've also got a very large honey locust, which if you know anything about honey locusts, they have a lot of thorns. So this particular honey locust was one that was developed in Dayton and patented without the thorns back in 1949. We also have a Rocky Mountain Douglas fir, which was what I guess you could call a gift from Oregon Governor Robert Holmes. So the Oregon webfoots, which you may not recognize, you may be more familiar with the Oregon Ducks, lost to Ohio State in the 1958 Rose Bowl, and apparently the bet was whoever lost the game had to send the winner a tree. And then here is the back of the property. So the gardens that you see there are planted with many native varieties of plants. You'll see the orange is a milkweed and the coneflower. It's really stunning garden. So one of the goals at the Heritage Garden is to educate our visitors of the importance and beauty of using native plants in their garden. So by seeing the plants used in a residential landscape, we hope that we inspire you to go home and do the same and plant natives in your own yard. Oops, sorry, I gotta get used to this. So the pergola in the back was something that was commonly found in homes of this era. And this pergola was actually put in by the Carlisle family, who moved in after Malcolm Jeffries died. The house, when he passed away, his wife subsequently sold it to his sister, and she lived in it for quite a while. So she had the pergolas put in, and these were recently restored. They have a flagstone floor, and there's these 3 beautiful ponds in the back that surround the patio that are filled with Ohio native plants, koi and frogs. And then in the summer, we hold educational programs over on the patio, which is really fun. So this is moving inside to the living room, and you notice that beautiful plastered ceiling. It's very distinctive. The walls are solid oak paneling. There's a beautiful carved stone fireplace where all the DeWine stockings are there, quite a lot, since he does have quite a large family. And then the bay windows are leaded glass with oak surrounds. And then there's also a small collection of Ohio pottery and art glass, which are some of the ways that the resident highlights the industrial past of Ohio. So Ohio was perfect for making pottery because of all the sand and clay and the natural gas needed to make such things. So when the governor is not using this space, we are allowed to use it. We have our holiday party there, and we also have educational programs in the back room. So an interesting fact that many of you may be aware of, at one time inmates from one of the prisons used to come and help maintain the home. Unfortunately, there was some sort of a cigarette smuggling event that took place and a few other incidences that were occurring, and so they decided that that probably wasn't a good idea anymore. That was my granddaughter Lily. I took her to one of our Christmas parties. So, and another interesting fact, so when the Voinoviches moved into the residence, Mrs. Voinovich wanted to decorate the home in more period furnishings. So she apparently liked going to flea markets and tag sales and estate sales and found several pieces that are in the home. But she also found these chairs that had been actually used down the street at Massillon State. So it turned out that the Department of Mental Health had several pieces that came from that home that they were storing, and so they wound up at the Heritage, or at the governor's residence, and the chair in the middle is used in the governor's study as I speak. So, and this table is in the dining room, and I'm not sure where the sofa is located. So the gardens at the Heritage Gardens were designed to represent the entire state of Ohio and include several native plants that are listed as being in danger of extinction by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So there's so many invasive species out there now that clog our wooded areas, and even along the highways, you know, in the spring, as you see all those Callery pear, they've just taken over, and they crowd out our natives, which means less food and shelter for insects, and potential extinction of native species, and reduced biodiversity. So First Lady Hope Taft conceived the idea of the Heritage Gardens during the spring of 2000, when she first became aware of native plants and their benefits. With the help of Gary and Guy and Jane, who is a well-known Akron Garden Club member in these circles, they worked with garden designers and plant specialists and garden clubs from around the state, and they helped to make Hope's vision into a reality. So the Heritage Garden now demonstrates the beauty of Ohio's diverse landscape and educates visitors about how they can use native plants in their garden. So as I said, the gardens are all about education and preservation. And thanks to Hope's curiosity, her connections and vision, the gardens have continued to thrive. Each Wednesday, beginning in early April, volunteers such as myself come to weed, prune, plant, and learn in the various gardens located throughout the property. Hope's there every week with us, working alongside of us and handling administrative functions as well, and lately leading a lot of tours. It's great that we're able to offer tours again, you know, with COVID and everything, we had to take a break. As a matter of fact, earlier this month, the Garden Club of America held their national conference in Columbus. So on one Wednesday, we hosted 600 of them coming through the gardens throughout the day. And it was really exciting, especially watching the Secret Service and the State Highway Patrol deal with 600 women coming through the gardens. And the gardens are in bloom right now, and they're just really stunning. So the garden design plan is there, and as you can see, it's quite extensive. The property itself is about 2 acres. So there's actually 5 major areas that form the basis of the master plan of the grounds, known as physiographic regions. So a few other special areas such as sedge meadows, fens, bogs, and cedar barrens are also represented in these gardens, but you'll all just have to come down and take the tour, which we strongly encourage. There's just so much more inside the home and out, and you can tour inside the home as well, so I encourage you to consider it. Come on down. As I mentioned, we have created replicas of the 5 physiographic regions of our state, and they include the central lowland till plains and the Allegheny Plateaus, both the glaciated and the unglaciated. We've got the Huron-Erie Lake Plains and the interior low plateau bluegrass section. So a physiographic or ecoregion is based on the soil type, the climate, and the weather. So all of these areas have unique characteristics, making Ohio an area notable for its incredible diversity. Heritage Gardens was created to represent that diversity and beauty of each of these areas across the state. So we currently have over 600 species of native plants in Ohio, and about 50 of them at this point in time are considered threatened or endangered. So in addition to caring for endangered native plants, the purpose of the Heritage Gardens is to educate all who visit and volunteer. Not many states in this country have 5 ecoregions that come together to give such a wide variety of plants like Ohio. But unfortunately, many of these are threatened or endangered because of all the development that's taking place and because of all the invasive species that are crowding out the natives. So our emphasis has always been that we want visitors to see how beautiful native plants are and how they can be used in their home gardens, and that choosing the right plant for the right place is very important. So this is a list of all the types of gardens that you will see at Heritage, and I'm not going to go through all of those, but as you can see, it's quite extensive. So as you enter the property, you'll run into this rather large rock. So this is one of the first gardens. It's known as the First Lady's Perennial Garden, and it contains both native and non-natives because they can thrive together. In addition, you will see this rock, which was uncovered about 10 miles northeast of Columbus, up near New Albany. The developer who found it just really didn't know what to do with it, and when Hope heard about it, she said, "I'll take it." So needless to say, it left a pretty big hole when he removed it, but they brought it down to the property. It's estimated to be more than 15 million years old, and you can see the glacial striations or the scratches across the surface. So the woodland wildflower garden, which is to the south of the front of the home, was one of the first gardens created at Heritage and contains hundreds of rescued plants. When I say rescued plants, I mean people have actually gone into construction sites or quarries or any other areas being developed to rescue Ohio native plants and replant them in sanctuaries and gardens. So this also includes a county walk, and it's one of the fun parts of the garden as you first enter. All 88 Ohio counties have contributed some kind of a stone or brick artifact to decorate this link that goes between the front of the house and the back. So as you can see, Stark County is very proudly represented as well. But I'm not sure what kind of stone that is. Maybe limestone, whatever's most common here. So as I said, we have 5 physiographic regions that are represented, and so this garden represents the central lowland till plains. So that area of the state is down near Columbus and heads west. Within this part of the state, bedrock is typically covered by a thick blanket of glacially deposited soil known as till, which reshape the area into smooth rolling landscape. So at Heritage, the prairie represents the central lowland till plains, where the very fertile soil provided some of our richest farmland. So some of the plants that you're going to find growing in our native prairie include the rattlesnake master and the cup plant, which is really a very interesting plant. Whoops, darn it, what did I do? Oh, I really went back. Okay. So the cup plant, why am I doing this? Has the way its leaves are lined up, they face north and south. So pioneers use that as a directional tool, hence the name compass plant. But actually what it's doing is protecting itself by minimizing exposure to its leaves from the glaring overhead sun. So here's some photos of the prairie in bloom. We have over 50 native prairie plants growing in this garden. Some of the other flowering plants in here are like royal catchfly, which is a very beautiful plant that hummingbirds love, and rattlesnake master, which is over in the lower right-hand corner, and Sullivan's milkweed, a hummingbird favorite. So no, there's not that's not snow, that's actually sand. So the Huron-Erie Lake Plains include an area west of Toledo with a very unusual plant community. This area is more than 150 square miles and contains a broad ridge of fine yellow quartz sand that covers parts of Henry, Fulton, and Lucas counties. This acidic sand ridge area is known as the Oaks Opening. I don't know if any of you have ever been up there, but it was formed by 3 lakes that preceded Lake Erie. It features the most diverse plant community found anywhere in the state of Ohio, with over 700 species of plants that grow in this region. We have replicated this area at Heritage by bringing in sand and plants from the region and creating our own version of the Oaks Opening. So the sand that you see Hope and her daughter Anna shoveling there is actually sand used in a golf course. So what we did was we brought in native soil or native sand and placed it on top, because that would have been a lot of sand to bring. And that's where I primarily work. It's a dune which involves identifying plants that don't belong and thinning out those that do belong. For example, common horsetail or Equisidium arvense is one that I'm constantly pulling due to its rapidly spreading habit. Horsetail is one of the oldest plants known, I think. It's been determined to have been around at least 416 million to 359 million years ago. So it's pretty amazing. There's really a lot of diversity in the plantings at this garden and things I've never heard of or ever seen. So as I mentioned, this area of the state is more than 150 square miles and is in an area of sand barrens, prairies, sand dunes, wet sedge meadows, and woodlands of widely spaced stunted oaks. So due to this variety of ecological communities, more state-listed species of plants such as wild lupin spatulate leaves, sundew, and sweet fern occur in the oak's opening than in any other physiographic region of the state. So I was fortunate to go to this area with Guy Denny, who was the retired ODNR director, who is an expert on the oak's opening. And we actually were able to rescue lupin, which you see in that photo on the right there, the purple flower. They're just a stunning lupin that is a state endangered species. So another area along the Lake Erie coast and broadening out in northwest Ohio is the Huron-Erie Lake Plain ecoregion. One of the special features of this area are the Alvar communities of Marblehead Peninsula and Kelly's Island, with its famous glacial striations and grooves. So their area is also famous for its lakeside daisy, which is another federally listed plant whose largest population can actually be found up on the peninsula. And when I say federally listed, meaning that the federal government has listed it as an endangered species. So the Alvar is Columbus limestone that's been exposed on the surface since the last glaciers scraped it clean. So it contains bare, sunny, dry alkaline cracks that provide the perfect habitat for the daisy that is really hard to replicate. But we were able to replicate it at the Heritage Gardens. We brought in 2 large slabs of the stone, and there you see we have the daisies growing alongside it. So we get very excited. We actually count how many we have, and the current count is at about 100, and we were very excited that 50 of them were in bloom at one time. So it's a really big deal. As a matter of fact, it's such a big deal that we had to get approval from the USDA in order to bring those daisies to the Heritage Garden. Helps to know people. So this was in 2021 when I got to go up to the Lafarge Quarry, which is up on Lake Erie in Marblehead, and we actually rescued lakeside daisies. We spent the morning in between dynamite blasts, which was a little interesting, and digging up these endangered plants, and then we replanted them in an area that the state designated as a preserve just for the lakeside daisies. And this is a photo of the quarry. It was a fascinating place to go. So we were over on this side rescuing plants. So along the eastern side of Ohio, we have the beginning of the Allegheny Mountains. So the area is known as the Allegheny Plateaus and is divided into 2 major parts. So the glaciated Allegheny Plateau is in the northeast corner of the state and has plants from the Pennsylvania highlands brought to Ohio by the ancient Pittsburgh River. The other part is the southern section known as the unglaciated Appalachian or Allegheny Plateau, or Appalachia as it's more commonly called, with its plants brought here on the ancient Tees River as it made its way from North Carolina to the headwaters of the Mississippi River. So the oldest landscape in Ohio occupies the Appalachia. It's a very rugged, heavily wooded Appalachian hill country, and as a result, there's a lot of diversity in plants and animals that grow and live in this part of the state. So at Heritage, we have created our own Appalachia Garden, which includes several raised beds that were created with stone from the southeast part of the state. These beds were made with very specific soil and drainage conditions in order to grow plants that can thrive in their natural habitat. So one bed actually contains sandstone blocks that were salvaged from a washed out covered bridge near Zanesville. In another area of this garden, the rock shown on this slide is called Peebles Dolomite, and it was brought from a farm that was located down in Adams County. Each of these gardens represent 2 very different habitats, and you'll find many plants that grow nowhere else in Ohio. There's actually a violet that grows on the top of that rock that is a very rare violet. And there's also columbine, native columbine that's over on the left that grows right out of that rock. In addition, we've got some June blooming rhododendrons back there, mountain laurel, and sourwood, which is actually the reddest tree in the autumn mountains. The interior low plateau, also known as the bluegrass section of Ohio, is located at the bottom of the state along the Ohio River and extends down to Arkansas. Whoops, there goes my water. As Ohio gets warmer, it will probably grow to cover a larger portion of our state. So it's characterized by ancient reddish yellow calcareous soils and deep valleys carved out of easily eroded shale. This area of our state is truly unique, and many rare and endangered species of plants grow here, such as the little gray polypody fern and Canby's mountain lover. You probably never even heard of either of these plants. But growing up on a wall facing the driveway at the residence, you'll see crossvine. That's one of the first flowers that blooms in the spring after the ephemerals. And another one that you'll see blooming is this beautiful passion flower, whose only, the blossoms only last a day before their maypop seeds begin to form. And if you grow passion flower in your yard, you know how prolific it can be, as my husband can tell you. The Serpent Mound meteorite crater is also located in this region, which is fascinating because of the fact that the older rock is found on top of younger rock down there. It's been suggested that that area was hit by a meteorite thousands of years ago. So no worries, it's been a long time. So the glaciers move through northern glaciated Appalachian Plateau, which is in the northeastern part of Ohio and includes Stark County. So erodible soft shale bedrock in the more northerly portion of the plateau enabled the glaciers to easily cross over this bedrock, laying down glacial deposits as far south as northern Stark and Columbiana counties. So in addition, big blocks of stagnant ice broke from glaciers, and when they melted, they formed lakes and bogs. Quail Hollow has a lot of peat bogs, and the Portage Lakes are actually considered kettle lakes. They were formed more than 12,000 years ago. So, of course, since they existed, we have to create them at the Heritage Garden, which we did. So we actually have a bog there where we grow the cranberry, and we've got sphagnum moss, which is common in these bogs, as well as the bog orchid. We actually installed a special cistern and well to collect rainwater, because that's the only kind of water you can use in these bogs, because otherwise it's not acidic enough. Tap water would, with all the chemicals, would just kill everything that grows in there. So all we use on this is rainwater. We also have 2 tamaracks, which, have you never heard of a tamarack? They're very common in bog areas. They're actually a deciduous pine. They lose their needles in the fall. Tamaracks, like I said, were commonly found around lakes and bogs. And actually, did you know the flower of a cranberry looks like a crane's beak, and that long ago was actually called craneberry, but apparently that was too wordy, so we had it shortened to cranberry. Thought that was interesting. There's the cranberries that grow at Heritage. We also have trillium growing in the woodland wildflower, another spring ephemeral. It's a beautiful one, and it's our state flower. So one of the main goals at Heritage Garden is to encourage people to work with nature instead of trying to control it. We avoid using chemicals. We choose native plants that like the growing conditions in the garden. We help pollinators with the flowers that we plant. Our goal is just to obviously keep everything native and supporting the pollinators and supporting us ultimately. So on the right, Hope and Deborah Kanapke, she's a well-known gardening expert in Columbus. She's also one of our volunteers. They're looking at the rare and endangered Walter's violet that, as I mentioned before, grows on that Peebles dolomite. It's an endangered species, but like I said, we're very fortunate that we have people like Deborah in the garden. Her knowledge and expertise is just so beneficial. So I hope you enjoyed this quick tour through the Heritage Gardens. It's, some say, Columbus's best kept secret. There's so much history here in this little corner of Bexley, and I hope that you'll come and visit us sometime. You'll see me up on my sand dune. Tours are free, and they take place only on Wednesdays. Just go to the Ohio Governor's Residence website, and you can get all the details. You do have to make a reservation. So in January of this year, I had a chance to step outside of my comfort zone. Because of my involvement at Heritage Gardens, I became aware of an opportunity to travel to Ecuador with a nonprofit called Tandana, which was actually founded by Hope's daughter, Anna. So Tandana's goal is to bring together people of different cultures in order to create and nurture respectful and responsible relationships. We were considered guests, not tourists, and we were actually invited into people's homes there and throughout the community to learn about the rich indigenous culture of Ecuador. Tandana Foundation offers support for community initiatives in Otavalo, Ecuador, and the surrounding areas there, and in Mali in Western Africa. So support can be found for initiatives such as addressing food security, environmental conservation, or income generation. Another way they support initiatives is by offering trips with intention, which is why Master Gardeners participated. It gave us an opportunity to connect with community members and contribute to their projects, all while learning about local Quechua culture and enjoying the beautiful scenery. So another program that they offer are scholarships for secondary and university students in Ecuador. And we were very fortunate to meet several scholarship recipients, hang out with them and learn more about their culture. So I traveled to Otavalo, which is about 2 hours north of Quito, along with 19 other Master Gardeners, and we spent a week learning more about Tandana's mission and this area. So we stayed in the city of Otavalo, and this is where we wound up staying, this lovely hotel run by a woman and her family. The weather was fairly pleasant during the 60s during the day, and then usually low 50s, high 40s in the evening. Lodging was simple, but very comfortable. This is my room before I had to relocate because we had a little earthquake. And it was just strong enough to knock out some of the plumbing. And so just the one side of the building, fortunately. But I was surprised by how humid it is down there. I thought I was going to be able to hand launder some clothes, but nothing ever dried. There's no central heating, there's no air conditioning. But they had these amazing wool blankets on the bed, so it was wonderful. It kept me quite toasty. And then every morning we had these wonderful breakfasts, all freshly made, and they had this incredible bread that, sorry Greg, my husband's a bread freak. And it was quite delicious, and they would make these amazing juices. And then after breakfast, we would all gather with Paul, our leader, and he would give us the agenda for the day. And I have to say, Paul was an extremely patient man, because when you have 20 women trying to, especially, a lot of type A's, but he did a great job coordinating everything and keeping us together. Interestingly enough, the week prior to his meeting up with us in Ecuador, he had been camping alone in the Amazon for a couple of weeks. He carried everything he needed on his back, including his canoe and his hammock that he slept in. So I think that probably brought him, chilled him out, made him ready for us when we all arrived. So we had a great bus driver who navigated some pretty steep roads and mammoth potholes. I never have seen potholes like those. Darn it, sorry. Having trouble with this mouse. Anyway. I lost it. There we go. Okay, so our first full day was spent at the Otavalo market. It's the largest indigenous market in South America, so lots of textiles and spices, and of course the Panama hat, which has actually always been made in Ecuador. In the 16th century, when the Spaniards first arrived in South America, they found native people wearing head coverings made of straw from the toquilla palm, or the Panama hat palm, as it's sometimes called. And the Spaniards actually encouraged the locals to produce Spanish-influenced hats for them, and over time, these straw toquilla hats evolved into the brim straw hats that you see today. So it was interesting to see so many of the women, especially that worked in the market. They still dress in their traditional style of the white blouse, and a navy skirt and shawl. And then they also wear many beautiful beads around their neck, most of them made of gold and red coral. And then the men typically wear a fedora and have a shimba, which is a long braid that hangs nearly to the waist. This is a very old custom dating back to pre-Inca times and is considered a symbol of indigenous ethnic identity. And even if they are called to go into the military, they don't have to have it cut. They're allowed to leave it as is. So the fresh produce at the markets was just incredible. This, not sure. Not quite sure how that got accomplished, but. So our second day was spent at the Otovalango Living Museum, just outside of Otavalo. Musco Otovalango is a living museum dedicated to the indigenous Quechua culture. In 2011, a cooperative of 20 Otavalo Quechua families became the first indigenous owners of Labrica San Pedro, which is a textile factory that powered for 200 years by exploited indigenous labor. So during the 19th and 20th century, Otovalango indigenous people were forced into slavery to produce fabrics that were sold around the world. So the museum has exhibits showing how the indigenous customs were, and various displays of weaving, ancestral medicine, and traditional customs of the Quechua, which is an indigenous tribe in this area. So we followed local customs when we were prepping the beds, which were much different than our style of gardening here in the States. We spent about 3 hours preparing beds and planting. Even the youngsters all stepped in to help out. I don't think they knew quite what to think of American women, but we all had a lot of fun. So it was a really productive morning, and we accomplished our first garden project successfully. We were at about 11,000 feet up the hillside, working in rich volcanic soil, where we planted onions and lettuce, pumpkin, beets, and chard seeds. So then the afternoon we spent learning more about the history of the museum. One of the things that really stood out was the fact that they would chain the laborers to their looms for hours, and it would take them a month just to create a blanket or a rug. So the photo on the right are some native costumes that they wear during special occasions. And interestingly, the Quechua tribe was the only indigenous group in Ecuador to survive the Spanish conquest. And to this day, they have retained many of their customs and way of life. So the indigenous people of Ecuador live in small communities located in the Andes Mountains. Most of them live in poverty and isolation, and they rely on what they're able to grow in their own gardens. So our next garden project was at the Samane El Legado School, located about 20 miles from Otavalo. Samane is a scholarship-based private school whose main objective is to educate indigenous children so that they're better able to improve their quality of life and take care of themselves and their family. So tuition is $180 a month. There are 102 students, grades 7 to 12. 30% go on to complete undergraduate studies, and 52% find employment. There's significant poverty in this region, and the school has done an amazing job of helping students overcome intergenerational poverty and transform their lives and their community. So the kids that attend this school come from one of 6 indigenous communities located in one of the most rugged and mountainous areas of Ecuador. Can you imagine having this view while you're in school or at work? It was quite stunning. So the volcano Cotopaxi is in the distance, which fortunately wasn't active while I was there. And again, we were at about 11,000 feet. So the school is actually an agricultural school where the kids learn to raise livestock, grow crops, and they even produce their own dairy products. Everything grown and raised at the school is for consumption at the school. So Tandana also supports students in pursuing their professional dreams after they graduate from high school. They go on to study accounting and human resources, medicine, even auto mechanics, subjects so that they can become professionals who can contribute their skills to their communities and their society. So we were fortunate to meet several people who had been part of the scholarship program. As part of this program, they returned to their communities to share their new skills and knowledge. So it was fun to meet them and learn about how their life had been changed because of the Tandana Foundation. Students, parents, and teachers and volunteers worked together to prepare beds. We planted lettuce, broccoli, and radish seeds. And as we dug out the deep trenches deep trenches, we built the mounds where everything was planted. So they create those trenches to avoid compacting the soil where the crops are growing. So it's definitely different than how I plant. Andy, a member of the Tandana staff, served as our interpreter. So we were fortunate to have several in our group who spoke Spanish and interpret for us. It's funny though, despite the language barriers, it was never really a problem. We all seemed to be able to communicate very well. So the philosophy at Salmonet is happiness, a good life, and to be happy, which they're taught as a choice. So Salmonet is one of the few in the area that offers 7th to 12th grade material and encourages the kids to acquire skills and education that will aid their villages and their own personal advancements. They were amazing kids, and they were fun, full of energy, enthusiasm, and a willingness to help. One afternoon, we traveled to a remote area to spend time with a Tandana grant recipient, Claudia Flores. She opens her home to tourists so that they may experience traditional and local dishes that are, as she says, full of flavor, history, and culture, created with Andean ingredients from her organic garden. So we all donned the traditional headscarves and got to work preparing our dinner. So Kausemi, which is the name of her business, is a Quechua word, loosely translates to lifestyle or daily living. So we were all assigned various tasks, such as peeling potatoes, which were used to make yapingachos, or potato pancakes. We also made a really delicious traditional dessert, quimbolitos, which is a type of a steamed cake. So they're typically made with a wheat flour along with corn flour, eggs, butter, sugar, and milk, all things needed for something good. And then they take the dough and they wrap it in an arturo leaf, which is similar to a canna leaf, and they steam it. And then once it's steamed, the cakes are then removed from the leaf and eaten, and they were very good. So it was quite surprising to learn that we were not only going to cook guinea pigs over a live fire, but that we were actually going to eat them. So guinea pigs are considered a delicacy in Ecuador, and they are quite expensive. So needless to say, they're only served during celebratory meals and sometimes on Sundays. So yeah, we ate that. Tasted like chicken. Our diet that week was a lot of corn, avocado, potatoes, and chicken. And we did have pizza, which was not bad. It wasn't like ours, of course, but and a lovely salad. Lots of fun fruits down there. So mango, passion fruit, and guanabana, or soursop, which is like a citrusy banana, those green things on the right. So our last gardening project was by far our most challenging, before and after. So I have no clue how we were able to accomplish what we did, but we wound up clearing out all those tall grasses to create those beds. Fortunately, again, we had the Tandana scholarship students with us that day, so they really helped us a lot. The first day was hard work as we cleared the fields in the heat to prepare for planting chocho seeds, which are a bean, and they're grown in the mountains. So after working in the field all day, all morning, the school staff and the children's parents prepared an amazing lunch for us called Pamba Mesa, which is a traditional style potluck. So they put cloths on the table and they put all the food on top of it, and we walked through and helped ourselves. It was a wonderful experience, though, and it was great to see how the Quechua culture celebrates and lives. A happy bunch once we got done. So Otavalo was a very interesting city with a population of about 40,000. So it's located in the Andean highlands of northern Ecuador, part of the Imbabura province, and as you can see, it's surrounded by volcanoes. That's Imbabura volcano off in the distance. It's an active, vibrant city. That hummingbird is actually part of an art museum known as Kintiwazi. It was perched high on the side of the hill where you could look out over the entire city. There are a lot of beautiful murals located throughout the city and in the countryside, and their purpose is to serve as a reminder to all who live there and visit, of the local native culture and its history. So it was really an amazing opportunity, and I'm grateful my husband didn't care that I headed down there. I mean, he cared, but you know. But we arrived in Ecuador as strangers, and we returned home as friends. It was just, like I said, it was a great experience. We got to connect with community members, and we got to contribute to their projects, all while learning about their culture and just enjoying a beautiful part of the world. So we were so fortunate to have kind and caring tour guides for our week in Otavalo, and if you ever had any desire to take a trip with intention, I strongly encourage you to take a look at what this organization offers. It's top notch. So, and if you're in Columbus, you have to come see the tiger at Franklin Park Conservatory. They have an amazing topiary display going on right now, so I had to include this photo for all of you. And with that, if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. That's Squeak. No questions? Okay, thank you for your attention.